I never thought I'd write something like this. I'm practical stubborn that way. But what happened on a winter night in 2023 broke whatever neat box I kept my beliefs in. It was a winter night in 2023. Snow had been falling and the building hummed like a tired machine. I came home after a late shift. The hallway smelled of salt and damp wool. I kicked off my boots, made coffee, and left my bedroom window cracked a hair because the radiator smelled of burnt dust. The apartment felt ordinary and warm. Soft light spilling from the kitchen, everything as it needed to be. At 12:35 a.m., a soft tapping started at the base of my bedroom wall. Tap, pause, tap, deliberate, patient. I held my breath and pressed my ear to the plaster. The tapping stopped, and the silence that followed had weight. It wasn't wind, it wasn't pipes. It carried intent. I tried to sleep, but my body wouldn't let go. At 2:10 a.m., the noise returned, louder, layered with a faint scraping like nails along brittle paint. The sound was inside the house, inside the wood and concrete. I wrapped a coat and moved toward the sound. The noise shifted as I did, almost tracking me. When I paused, it stopped. By the radiator, I smelled something metallic iron and damp, like an old wound. When I looked closer, I found scratch marks that thinned the paint from the inside out. Crescent gouges and pinprick dents, wet to the touch. I touched them, and my finger came away with a dark smear that stained my skin like ink. No pet or tool explained those marks. I called the building super and left a shaky message. At 3:48 a.m., the tapping turned urgent, and beneath it, a low rasp rose and fell. It wasn't a language I knew, but it had cadence, the ghost of consonants. My chest tightened until it felt like there was ice under my sternum. I hit record on my phone. The file plays back as wind in daylight, but in that hour it sounded like someone pressing pages together and reading the margins of my life aloud. I opened the door and found shallow prints on the corridor carpet, not mine, small and dragging, as if abbreviated weights had shuffled along. The prints led to the service door at the end of the hall. Outside, snow had been blown into a crescent inside the threshold, and a thin trail sliced through it as if something heavy had been dragged in and out. Under the streetlight on the opposite building, I saw reversed smears on the bricks, like palms left against glass from the outside, then wiped away in a hurry. The shape looked human and not human at once, stretched, narrow, knuckles at odd angles. I crouched by the alley grate where steam pulsed up from the street. The steam kissed my face like warm breath. For a blink, there was a pale curve moving under the concrete, an arm, a hand. Then the light shifted and took it. I jammed my phone between the bars and recorded. The footage is a blur, but one frame shows a smear that looks like a hand flattening against concrete and then slipping away. I watched the frame until my eyes burned. After that, the sound stopped. The building exhaled and settled back into its ordinary noises. I closed the service door and thought irrationally that if I locked it tight enough, whatever had been trying to communicate would go away. In daylight, the scratches remained, and the smears had dried into patterns that matched no animal I knew. They followed a rhythm that matched the lines of my palm, a coincidence I couldn't swallow. No one returned my call. The neighbors didn't mention anything. Doors stayed shut like sealed lips. Weeks later, during scheduled repairs, maintenance found an old access shaft sealed since the 1960 seconds. They lowered a camera and found long gouges on the shaft walls, gouges that curved and overlapped like someone had clawed at the concrete for years. At first, they blamed rodents. Then an older technician looked at the footage too long and went quiet. He told me quietly he'd seen similar marks once before at a site that had its own ugly rumors. I moved months after because I couldn't sleep in rooms that remembered the sound of fingernails. Sometimes I drive past that building when there is snow and the city shrinks down to white and salt. On those nights, I press my face to my car window and look up at the same windows and wonder if something is watching from the sealed shaft, waiting for weather to soften the concrete. The memory sits in my chest like a shard of ice that won't melt. I don't have answers. I have a recording that sounds empty in daylight, unexplained gouges, and the memory of a rasp that matched the rhythm of my name. Enough to know some things pry at the edge of our world patiently, on winter nights. It started as a choice to drive out and sleep in a rental cabin for a winter night in 2022. I needed distance. The road was a smear of headlights and salt. The cabin smelled of pine and antifreeze. Inside, a lamp glowed. A kettle cooled on the stove. The old clock ticked like a steady heart. I unpacked, made tea, and watched snow land in slow, clean flakes. At 11:12 p.m., I heard a faint scuff on the porch. I told myself it was nothing. At 11:47 p.m., the scuff circled the house porch, side door, back stair, each contact with wood holding its own tone. The air shifted, smelling faintly of wet earth and old paper. I stayed near the door with my phone because movement felt better than frozen silence. When a knock came at the back door, it was 3 short raps and a patient pause. I opened the chain a crack. Snow sifted in. No footprints in the drift, just a smear across the frame where something had leaned and lifted away. Up close, the smear looked like condensation pressed in a ring of tiny marks, too precise to be random. At 1:05 a.m., a shuffle came from the loft. The ladder creaked under me. Trunks were closed. On the railing, I found a thin vertical streak, wet and red smudged like iron. I touched it. My fingers came away stained. It dried into a pattern that matched the ridges of my palm exactly, like a hand pressed to my skin, then to the wood. Photos showed only shadow. The noises grew bolder. Steps paced near my bedroom door. A low scrape sounded like a chair pulled across the floor. Then silence. At 2:40 a.m., the mantel clock stopped mid-tick and the room thinned, as if someone had stretched a sheet over everything. Then a voice began, not words, but a low, measured in-tone that used the cadence of speech without language. It threaded through vents and wrapped around my bones. It felt like someone reading the margins of my life aloud. I checked the hallway vent and found a scrap of cloth stuck between metal and insulation, gray and damp, stained in the same pattern as the railing. When I pulled it free, the fibers were coarse and rigid. The stain fit the ridges of my palm. I left the cabin. I drove until the sodium lamps blurred and didn't stop until the thought of turning back felt impossible. At dawn, I called the rental people. Their daytime inspection found no forced entry, only that scrap of cloth. The man cataloging the place frowned so long he stopped speaking. He told me, quietly, the cabin had been vacant after an accident, and that people sometimes mentioned echoes. He offered no details. That night stayed with me. I remember the way the lamplight pooled on the floor and how ordinary things felt suddenly sharp. When I drove away, I kept checking the rear view, watching the cabin shrink until the road swallowed it. I slept badly at a friend's place and pretended I could forget. In the weeks after, random things crept into my life. My phone would flash at night with a single vertical line, then clear when I looked. I woke once with a crescent bruise on my forearm, cool and precise, like a thumb pressed and held. I took the cloth for analysis. Labs reported mixed fibers and rust traces, nothing conclusive. The pattern of the stain baffled them. Sometimes I stand in my kitchen when the wind wails and the house feels thin, pull the gray cloth from a plastic bag, and hold it to the light. The stain matches the ridges of my palm. That fit is small proof, and it unsettles me more than anything else. It's the feeling that a place learned me and kept a trace. People tell me it's stress. Maybe. But there are places that collect small things. A knock, a scuff, a hand. They don't have intent the way we do. They are patient. On winter nights, they wake. And if you are there, they remember you. It was a winter night in 2021 when I learned that silence can feel heavier than sound. Snow had been falling all day, the kind that muffles the world. By the time I got home from work, it was 9:24 p.m. My small house sat on the edge of a frozen tree line. Inside, the heater hummed and the smell of thawing boots hung in the air. Everything felt ordinary, even cozy. At 10:03 p.m., I heard the first noise, a slow drag against the side wall, like something heavy scraping down the siding. I froze, cup in hand. I waited, listening. The sound stopped. I told myself it was just snow sliding from the roof. But the walls stayed quiet in that stubborn way that makes excuses feel thin. At 11:15 p.m., the sound came again, this time closer to the back door. A long drag followed by 3 dull thuds. I stood in the kitchen with my phone, staring at the doorframe. No knock, no voice, just the thuds like someone pressing their head to the wood and waiting for me to answer. My chest felt tight, like the air itself had turned to ice water. I decided to check. I opened the blinds and looked out into the snowy yard. Nothing, not even footprints. The snow was perfect and untouched, a flat sheet under the moonlight. And yet, when I opened the door a crack, I saw a mark in the snow. Not a footprint, but a wide streak, as if something had been dragged across the yard and stopped just before the step. By 12:41 a.m., the noises had spread through the house, scraping above the ceiling, a dull knock at the bathroom wall, faint pressure under the floorboards. It felt like the house was being mapped from the outside, line by line. I pressed my palm to the plaster, and the wall pushed back a faint vibration, steady as breath. I called a friend on speakerphone just to hear another voice, but halfway through my explanation, the call cut out. Not dropped, not bad service, just a sharp click and silence. The line was dead until morning. At 1:27 a.m., I heard the whisper of movement on the stairs. My house has only 7 steps, and I could track each one by the subtle creak of wood. 1. Pause. 2. Pause. Until it reached the top, my throat locked up. I sat on my bed holding my flashlight, heart pounding. When I turned it on, the hallway was empty. The air, however, carried the scent of iron, sharp and raw. I retreated to the corner of my room and waited. At 2:09 a.m., the heater shut off on its own, leaving the silence complete. And in that silence came a sound that made me shake, a low hum, deep and steady, like a man's voice holding one endless note. It came from inside the wall itself, vibrating the studs. I slammed my fist into the plaster. The hum stopped. But when I looked down, my knuckles weren't bloody. Instead, they were stained with dark streaks, as if the wall had bled ink on me. At 3:02 a.m., the house shifted. Every window rattled at once, but the wind outside was still. The drag marks outside the door were gone, erased by something. Yet across the porch railing was a new pattern, 5 streaks, long and parallel, curling downward like claws. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with every light on, waiting for morning. When the sun finally pushed in through the blinds, the streaks on the railing had frozen into ice, glistening like glass. Weeks later, I found something worse. In the basement corner, tucked into the stone foundation, was a patch of old wood. The surface was covered in carvings. Lines, arcs, shapes like spirals cut with something sharp. They weren't random. They matched the pattern on my stained knuckles, the same curves and ridges. I never figured it out. I sold the house in spring and never told the buyers, but I drive past it sometimes in winter, when the snow lays flat and the tree line looks heavy. The house always looks quiet, but I know that silence carries weight. Because some nights, even from the road, I swear I hear it. The slow drag against the wall, patient and steady, as if waiting for someone new to listen. I have never liked winter. Most people talk about how the snow is beautiful, how it makes the world glow under the streetlights, how the quiet feels comforting. Not to me. For me, winter always feels like the air is too thick, too still, like the world is waiting for something. In 2020, on a night that was colder than any I can remember, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. I lived in a small house then, just beyond a patch of woods that bordered frozen fields. My nerves had been wrecked from stress at work. I thought maybe the night air would soothe me. The snow was deep, and every step crunched loud enough that I kept glancing behind me. My breath puffed into clouds, and the only light came from a dim lantern on my porch, fading the farther I went. When I turned back, the house already looked far away, just a glow swallowed by trees. I don't know when I first sensed it, but there was a point when the crunch of my steps didn't match. There was a second rhythm, not an echo, not the crack of branches, something else walking where I walked. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I started again, slow. Crunch, crunch. Behind me, faint and delayed, another crunch. I told myself it was a deer. That lie kept me moving, but the deeper I went, the heavier the air grew. It felt like I had stepped into a pocket of silence where even the wind wouldn't move. The trail bent left, and that's when I saw the first mark. In the snow, half buried, was a handprint. Not like someone falling, not scattered. A deliberate press, Fingers long, palm deep, no other prints around it, just one, crisp against the white. I backed away. My chest ached with the cold, and my legs wanted to run, but the woods felt alive watching. I turned toward home, deciding that my little midnight walk had gone far enough. But when I retraced my steps, I realized something awful. My footprints, the ones I had just made minutes ago, were gone. The snow lay flat, untouched, except for the handprint that now seemed fresher, sharper. I walked faster. My pulse thudded in my ears. Every few steps I swore I heard something trailing close, too close, like breathing at the back of my neck. When I glanced over my shoulder, the trees stood silent, but their shadows bent in strange ways, longer than they should have been. At the edge of the clearing, I finally saw my house again. Relief washed through me, but it didn't last, because at the porch, standing where the lantern light cut into the snow, was a figure. Not tall, not short, human-shaped. Still, it wasn't there when I left. The worst part? The snow between us was untouched. No trail leading to it, no sign of movement, just my yard, white and perfect. I stopped dead. The figure didn't move, didn't wave, didn't breathe, just stood. My instinct screamed at me not to approach, but I couldn't stay out there forever. The cold was cutting into me like blades, so I moved forward, step by shaky step, trying to focus on the light, on the warmth waiting inside. And then the lantern flickered. Once, twice, out. I swear, in the split second before darkness swallowed the porch, the figure tilted its head slow, unnatural, as if acknowledging me. I ran. I didn't care about silence, didn't care who heard. I bolted through the snow, boots slipping, lungs burning. When I hit the steps, I swung the door open and slammed it shut behind me. My whole body shook as I locked every bolt, every chain. The house was black except for my kitchen lamp. I pressed my back to the door and waited. Minutes passed. My heart slowed. I told myself I was imagining it. That my brain, exhausted and scared, had conjured a shape out of shadows. But then I heard it, a sound so soft it almost broke me. 5 knocks on the other side of the door. Measured, patient. I didn't move the rest of the night. I sat in the kitchen chair with the lights on, listening. The knocking never came again, but the silence felt loaded, like something crouched just beyond the wood. In the morning, sunlight poured through the windows. The world outside was calm, ordinary, untouched. No figure, no footprints. Nothing to prove the night had ever happened, except for the door. Across the wood, pressed deep into the paint, was the shape of a handprint. Long fingers, narrow palm, exactly like the one I'd seen in the snow. I never slept properly in that house again. Every winter since, whenever the air goes still and the nights stretch too long, I hear it. Not knocks, not footsteps, just silence. And in that silence, I remember how the snow erased my trail as if it wanted me lost, as if it wanted me found. Listen, I don't even know how to start this. I guess I'll just say it straight. It was the winter of 2019, late December. Cold enough that my breath froze on my scarf. Cold enough that the windows in my little rental rattled every time the wind hit. I'd just gotten back from a friend's place. I remember checking the clock on the stove. 12:06 a.m. I tossed my jacket on the chair, kicked my boots to the corner, and thought I was done with the day. The house was quiet. Too quiet, honestly. Old houses usually pop and groan when the temperature drops, but that night, it just didn't. It sat there, still, like it was holding its breath. I tried to ignore it. I microwaved leftovers, scrolled on my phone, tried to convince myself it was just my nerves. But the silence was thick. I could hear the hum of my own blood in my ears. And then it started. A ringing sound, faint, metallic, almost like wind chimes. Only I don't own wind chimes. The sound was coming from outside the living room window. I pulled the curtain back just a little. Snow everywhere, yard covered, untouched. No tracks, no sign of movement. But the sound kept going. Ding, ding, ding. I should have left it alone. But curiosity, it eats at you. I cracked the window just a little. That's when I realized it wasn't chimes. It was tapping. A steady rhythm, like someone dragging metal against glass. Only the glass was intact. Nothing there, just snow. I shut the window fast, locked it. But within minutes, the sound moved. It wasn't at the window anymore. It was at the back door. Tap, tap, tap. Careful, measured. I called my brother, straight to voicemail. I left some half-panicked message about someone being outside. While I was talking, the tapping stopped. For maybe 30 seconds, I thought it was over. Then the call cut dead, phone went black. Battery at 60%, but it just shut off in my hand. That's when the doorknob started to turn. Slow, like whoever was out there wanted me to hear it. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a fireplace, poker, and waited. My throat was dry. My hand shook so bad I almost dropped it. But the door never opened. The knob just kept twisting left, then right, squealing softly in the quiet. Finally, it stopped. I didn't breathe for a long time. At 2 a.m., I heard movement upstairs. That froze me worse than anything else because I live alone and I hadn't been upstairs all night. The steps were soft, deliberate, pacing back and forth across the spare room. I thought about running outside, but the idea of stepping into the snow felt worse. So I crept upstairs. Each step moaned under my weight. I reached the top, heart hammering, and the sound cut off. The spare room door stood half open. I pushed it slowly, poker raised. The room was empty, but the window was wide open. Snow had blown in across the floor, neat as flowers spilled from a bag. And in the snow were prints, not footprints, hands, dozens of them. Palm after palm pressed into the drift, fingers long, dragging toward the door. I backed away so fast I tripped into the hall. By the time I scrambled up, the window slammed shut, on its own. I swear to you, I didn't touch it. The glass fogged instantly, and when the fog cleared, I saw it, a handprint, one single, perfect handprint on the inside of the glass. I locked myself in my bedroom after that, shoved the dresser against the door. I don't think I blinked until sunlight came through the blinds. The weirdest part, when I finally checked the spare room in the morning, the snow was gone. The window shut tight, the floor bone dry. No prints, no trace of anything. But when I touched the glass, it was ice cold, colder than the air outside, and pressed faintly in the corner, so faint you had to angle the light to see it was the outline of another handprint, bigger, higher up. I don't tell people this story. I don't want the looks, the questions, but winter never feels the same. Every year, when the nights stretch long and the silence sets in, I hear it again, the careful tapping, like someone patiently asking to be let inside. And sometimes, when I walk past a mirror, I swear I see fog that doesn't belong to me. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated on the next videos.